Good morning. Welcome to the State Board of Education meeting beginning today. This is October, so this is our October meeting. And we have live web streaming available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/stateboard. So I call the meeting to order, and Denise, please call the roll.
Lisa Fricke? Yes. Patsy Coe-Johns?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran?
Present.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Present.
Commissioner Bloomstead?
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. I would like to remind our board members to engage their microphones before speaking and to turn them off when they are done speaking, and please turn off any personal cell phones. Thank you. We are going to move something on the agenda. As we talked about yesterday, we have a resolution to honor our veterans with Veterans Day coming up. And so I'm asking for a motion to adopt the State Board resolution regarding Nebraska veterans.
So moved. Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And your votes, please. Denise?
Can you remind me who made the motion and second?
Patsy made the motion and Rachel made the second.
Lisa Fricke?
Yes, I tried to turn off my phone and realized that it was already off, and I actually turned it back on, and I didn't want it to go off, so I put it in the other room. Sorry.
That's okay.
We're still working on that technology thing.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
Patsy Coe-Johns?
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, I would like to ask John Hilgert and John McNally to please come up forward, please. And I know we also have some veterans in the audience, and I would ask them to please stand and be recognized. And thank you all for your service. Our resolution is going to be read by Lisa Fricke. Lisa, please.
I read this on behalf of the veterans in the room and around the nation, and in honor of the many veterans that have served in my family. Whereas, since the establishment of our country, U.S. military personnel have been dispatched to all parts of the world to defend our freedoms and that of our allies. And whereas our courageous soldiers have built noble tradition of faithful and dedicated service to our nation, and whereas generations of selfless servicemen and servicewomen have served from the state of Nebraska when duty called, who willingly put themselves in harm's way to defend our lives and our liberties, and whereas Veterans Day originated from armistice of World War I at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and then by legislation in 1954 has since become a national holiday honoring all veterans and their service to our country. And whereas the members of the State Board of Education strongly support our veterans who have sacrificed so much to ensure our freedom, and furthermore encourage all schools to recognize the service and sacrifice of our military men and military women, now therefore be it resolved that the State Board of Education hereby express to all Nebraska veterans our gratitude and admiration for their service to our state and to our nation. On behalf of the State Board of Education, we recognize all of you.
Thank you very much.
accept this on behalf of the 140,000 veterans in the state of Nebraska who serve their nation, and especially those veterans after their service who have chosen to return home to Nebraska and serve our communities through educating our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, gentlemen, and receiving that resolution. We will now move to item 2, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting in September. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Your
Madam
votes?
Chairman, it's
Yes.
irrelevant to this. I would like to have said it before they left, but, you know, I believe state law requires that Veterans Day is one of those days that be recognized. And I hope that our schools across the state will join this board in doing things that are appropriate to recognize the service of those veterans come Veterans Day next month. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, your votes, please. Well, it's Friday.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
John Wetzel.
Yes.
Patsy Jones,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Lisa Freaky.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. We will move on to today's agenda. Commissioner, are there any recommended changes?
Yes, as we discussed yesterday, we're going to go ahead and remove item 7.2.c, one of the policy committee items, to go ahead and keep working on that in policy committee, so we'll remove that item.
Okay.
I didn't hear what he said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to remove item 7.2.c, which is the policy committee item on pregnant and parenting. That we had some more work to do on it, as we discussed yesterday.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda as amended?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Your votes, please.
Patsy Jones,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Lisa Freaky,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Wetzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Now we will move into public comment. We have one person who would like to speak before the board, and we thank her for coming. Mrs. Pinkerton, you will have 5 minutes. No, we have 2 now. Good morning.
Good
You'll have
morning.
5 minutes, please.
Okay. Well, I'm saddened but not surprised to see the adoption of these science standards. And I ask that all of you, except for Pat McPherson, investigate how you came to be used to advance an agenda that deprives children of tools for discovering the truth. Scientific method, as we learned it, it has been determined as too linear, and so last millennium to give children instruction on how they can make a hypothesis and test that hypothesis with an independent variable, look out for confounding variables, and so forth. I suggest to you that it's deliberate, that there's a movement that to deprive children of facts and the ability to make determinations for themselves, because it's easier to manipulate children by their feelings, and a population that you want to accept as truth whatever you decide to tell them this week or next week, even if two things might be on their face irreconcilable. If you look, if you have a moment and are thinking of a possible St. Peter's experience where you have to answer for being used by this movement, I suggest you investigate academia and their role in helping you lead children off this cliff. Don't know if you noticed, I hope you did notice this event on campus on August 25th. I've given you an article, and there are some updates, not as much of an update as I would hope to see, but I have a letter that I'm presenting to Chancellor Green that I might shed some light on this subject. Dear Chancellor Green, on August 19th of this year, you told some 5,000 incoming UNO freshmen that, quote, the university community has a responsibility to create an environment welcoming to all where each person feels accepted, valued, and safe, close quote. On August 25th, employees of yours made a mockery of those words. How long should Caton Mullen's dad be expected to wait for words and actions such as you promise will support his 19-year-old daughter feeling accepted, valued, and safe on campus? How long should other dads, moms, prospective students, and donors have to wonder if you will live up to the core values that you proclaim? Quote, non-negotiable, close quote, you said about taking corrective action when someone is observed being, quote, treated unfairly or in a demeaning manner, close quote. These are remarks from the Chancellor's own speech to 5,000 incoming freshmen, and within a week, this is what happened. And no, this young lady does not feel safe or accepted on our campus. Imagine that. The official word has been that our concerns are for the safety of this jewel who is on our payroll. Kaylin says nobody, the university isn't telling her they're concerned about her safety, and she's not feeling very welcome. I had high hopes for your leadership. You seem to me, my concluding remarks to the Chancellor, to possess objectivity, curiosity, and humility that could help raise the bar for intellectual integrity at our university. As a UNL grad myself, I am praying for you to make the most of this opportunity to create the welcoming environment you envision. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a second speaker, Jack Spray. Please come forward. You have 5 minutes.
I won't need that. Jack Spray with Senator Lou Ann Linehan. Senator Linehan couldn't be here today, but she asked me to ask you guys when you're discussing item 8.4 to discuss a little bit. It's approve the exclusion amount for retirement contributions. Increase for districts shown on attachment, how that works with the law LB 512 that was passed this year, and to make sure you discuss that. So thank you very much, and 4 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Jack. That concludes our public comment. We will now, we have no hearings this morning. We will move to the action items on today's agenda. Molly, do you have motions?
Yes. I move to grant the Commissioner the authority to approve the purchase of curriculum for center-based and family child care home programs participating in Step Up to Quality.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any questions from that committee? Your votes, please.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Patricia Tam,
Yes.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patsy Co-Johns.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. We will move to the Policy Committee. I'm asking for a motion to approve the State Board's position on Statement S11.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. This position statement is in regard to Nebraska digital education. Your votes, please.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patsy Co-John.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. I'm asking for a motion to approve the State Board's position statement, Statement 5 on expanded learning. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, John.
Second.
Thank you, Patsy. Any discussion? Your votes, please.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patsy Co-Johns.
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, the rest of the Policy Committee, we have had one that has been taken off, and the resolution has been taken care of. So we move to John and the Finance Committee.
Before I
7.3A.
Before I ask for the motion on this, I just want to thank, if you will, the NDE staff and the members of the committee for their cooperative effort in regards to working some of these deficit item issues to our satisfaction. So, thank you very much, and I'd like a motion to authorize the commissioner to submit to the department's deficit budget request and the Nebraska budget request and reporting system.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. We had quite a discussion yesterday in understanding what a deficit budget is and how that affects us. So any other questions or comments? Your votes, please.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Patsy Co-John.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
We move to 8.1, the consent agenda, Commissioner?
So normally I would just say we jump right into the consent agenda and ask for a motion. We just did hear that request, and I wanted to make sure the board members, if there was if you had an interest in doing that, and I know it's breaking from regular protocol, I suppose, but I will leave that up to the board, so whether or not there's any items you want to pull for individual discussion.
I move that we take 8.4A off the consent agenda and discuss it separately.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Your votes, please.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patsy Co-Johns,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes. Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda with the removal of item 8.4.b?
So move.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, 8.4.8. Please give my correction there.
8.4.A. Okay.
Okay, your votes, please.
And, I didn't catch the motion in the second.
I mean,
It was to, oh,
John made the motion and Rachel, are we?
By the way around.
Rachel made the motion,
I made
John
the
made the
motion.
second.
Okay, all right.
And
Thank you.
John seconded.
We'll review the tape later.
It's still early.
Okay, Lisa Fricky,
yes.
Patrick McPherson,
yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patsy Co-Johns,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
John Wetzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Bryce to come up to give us some background on 8.4.A. Thank you,
Hello.
Bryce.
I'm Bryce
Thanks.
Wilson, Director of Finance and Organizational Services. The question, I guess, that was raised was, what exactly is voluntary terminations or these exclusions? How are they used? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on what this is. Basically, the statute allows for school districts to exceed their spending authority. If you remember, we control school district spending in this state one of two different ways. We have the levy limit that controls how high they can set their levies for the general fund, with a few exclusions. We also control their spending. We certify to them how much they can spend in the general fund. One of the things that the statute allows for is exclusions that the state board permits or agrees to. Common one that is used by a lot of school districts is the voluntary termination agreements. That's the one that was questioned. What that does basically is allows a school district to provide incentives for some of their older teachers to retire and basically replace them with younger or less experienced teachers who come in way lower on the pay scale. The statute requires, originally when it was put into place, it didn't have this requirement, but they'd added it, I think around 2013-14, that schools have to show that their savings when they use these voluntary terminations, and the amount of those savings is what they can request in the exclusion to their spending limit. In addition to that, in 13-14 last legislative session, there was passed a bill to add additional stipulations onto the requirements to meet the voluntary termination pieces. Most of those pieces go into place for retirements occurring after September 1st, 2017. So ones that happened after this school year started. So most of what you're seeing this year on the voluntary terminations is still under the old rules. There are a few exceptions to that. For any kind of voluntary terminations that are part of collective bargaining agreements, those are being phased out, and so they only get 75% of what's in that collective bargaining agreement for this upcoming year, for the 17-18 school year. They also now, starting September 1st, only people that can qualify for these voluntary terminations are certificated teachers, and they are limited to $35,000 per person maximum over a 5-year period. So that's not $35,000 a year, it's $35,000 total for those 5 years, or until they hit the Medicare eligibility age, whichever comes first between 5 years and that Medicare eligibility age. And then they can still qualify under the original rules, which basically said as long as those retirements occurred prior to September 1, which basically said as long as they showed those savings, the school could claim that exemption.
Thank you. Commissioner, do you have anything?
And Bryce, could you just clarify on that? So the board gets these on an annual basis? How often do we get those? And to the extent, what's the process been in the past? Yeah.
Yes, it's a good clarification. So what happens is schools send in requests for these exclusions to us, and it's not just voluntary terminations. There's retirement exclusions. There are now I'm blanking on all the different ones. We have multiple for grants. So basically, if a school district receives a grant, we don't want to hold their spending down and not allow them to spend that money because it's not costing our taxpayers anything. If Walmart gave a school a grant, same kind of concept here. So they send in about April usually. You'll start getting a few schools sending these in to us, and they all flow in the summer when they're creating their budgets. Till this month is usually kind of when they start to taper off, but. Schools send in the request to us, we process it, go through, make sure that they're meeting all the requirements of the statute, and then we put them on your board agenda for your approval to either accept, modify, or deny.
Do board members have questions?
This,
Patrick?
obviously, there's one really big one here that catches everybody's eyes. It's Millard. On the legislation that was passed, was the intent of that, do you believe, to limit abuses of the districts perhaps had perpetrated or might perpetrate, or was it was it there to control this process? It would better control this process.
I think that was the intention behind the legislation, yes. I don't know that it was being abused by the districts. It's hard to say. I'd have to see more detailed calculations. I mean, they did have to show that the outgoing teachers' salaries were a certain level and their incoming. Now, what other costs, you know, and how much those new teachers moved up the scale during those 5 years, and if there were insurance costs for the older teachers that were in addition, you know, there's a lot of other things going on there to get the full picture. But the one you bring up specifically, the ironic thing about that is on the spending side of things. So what you're approving here as a board doesn't do Millard any good, because they have all kinds of unused budget authority. They don't need, what you're granting them is additional budget authority, and I think that they just apply for it every year because they've always applied for it every year. But they have $26 million of unused budget authority because they are limited in their spending by their levy, what they can raise in their levy. So this spending authority that they're getting, this $3 million spending authority, doesn't allow them to really spend anything additional because they don't have the resources to spend it. But they do, and most of the large schools that are up against their levy lid also get this voluntary termination exclusion as a levy exclusion, which doesn't come through the board, but is on their budget document. So you will see it for Omaha and several of the other schools as well as a levy exclusion, and that's where they benefit from it. So, and that will be reduced as well as a result of that law change.
Well, how does the fact that Millard is looking for a levy override impact this?
I think there's probably
How does it relate to this?
Well, it does affect it a little bit. I don't think it's significant. What they're going to be able to levy if they didn't get that exclusion will be reduced because next year, because the voluntary termination exclusion is going to reduce for them because they were one of the ones that used it in their collective bargaining agreement. I haven't looked at one of them, but that's what I've been told. So that will reduce somewhat what they can request. So that would be a little bit less in levy that they could raise, but when you're talking total dollar amount of what they're requesting, it's, I don't think, significant. I don't think that's really the big difference maker, I guess is what I would say is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, did you have a question?
Well, from my understanding of a couple of experiences, fantastic, exceptional teachers get around the age of 55. I know a couple of them personally who had health issues, and they didn't want to retire early because then they're off the school's group plan. And so the separation agreement, gives them enough money to purchase the exorbitant insurance amount until they get to the age of 62. That's one example. And then from my understanding, from what you just said, if people are given money, like grant money, and we don't allow to pass this, they're not going to be able to spend that extra money. Is that correct in that grant?
For the special grants piece, now there's
Right.
different pieces. I mean, you could, in theory, only approve the grant piece and not the voluntary terminations or retirement exclusion piece, which is the piece where the state requires the districts to pay an additional amount of retirement that they didn't used to have to, and they've given them that exclusion since that requirement. But yes, if Walmart walked into Omaha and said, oh, we have a $5 million grant we want to give you for early childhood, unless Omaha got an exclusion, in theory, they could take that grant, but they wouldn't really be able to do anything additional for their early childhood because they're limited in what they could spend.
That
is
what I was
correct.
trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And that's a big deal. When you're given money and then you don't have the authority to spend it, that's sad.
Yeah.
Especially for something like early
Especially when
childhood.
it's not costing the taxpayers in the district
Exactly.
or the state anything additional.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
lost opportunity. So, thank you.
Any other questions, Molly? Yes.
Okay, I move to approve school districts' requests for exclusions to the budget limitation in accordance with the provisions of the Tax Equity and Educational Opportunities Support Act.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Your votes, please.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patsy Ko-John's,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Bryce. Okay, we move to item 9, special presentations, of which we have none. Oh, there
I'm
is.
very special.
My deepest apologies, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Yeah, and depending on your patience, I can go for 3 hours or I can go much shorter. So John wasn't ready for that. What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and it was something that I had previously reminded you of in an email, and something that's important, I think, for us today. I am going to do some press, I guess I call it press availability, at noon today.
fancy term.
Yeah, it's a new fancy term we've come up with, I guess. But I wanted to spend some time being able to answer questions that might come from the press as it relates to our assessment changes and the results that are actually just becoming available to schools actually effectively today. So those individual, what we typically have in a process is that schools receive their individual student reports, and that information is available to schools to share with their parents and go through the parent-teachers conferences even, and be able to look at that. So we have a couple different things at play this year that are different that I wanted to be able to be kind of have folks be aware of. Number one, obviously, the changes that we've made in the standards. We've raised the bar relative to the expectations around English language arts, and we've changed the nomenclature as we got talking about that, what the levels of expectation are, what the cut scores happen to be, and so that information is included with the reports that go to parents. That's part of our processes and part of what DRC provides in that report. But that's also for math and also for science, right? So this is information that schools are using and using with their parents to talk with their students about how their performance is and how they're using that. The same is also true for ACT data, right? And so that's also a new process. We set the cut scores essentially at the last meeting, and so that data is not in that format, not yet available to parents. However, they've received the ACT data as you would normally receive ACT data. And so a couple of the dynamics I think are important to understand, and that I think from my standpoint is important to talk about, is we've really actually worked to raise the bar in Nebraska relative to the expectations on students, but we've also worked very hard as a state board to go through a transition of what we're doing on assessment, where we need to go as a state, how we need to be able to balance all of those changes with everything else that we're doing with, certainly with ESSA, but more importantly with AQuest, and tying those things together in a meaningful way. The other realities for us is normally about this time we would have our normal release of state data, right? But that is a bit delayed in our process relative to the timing for ACT data, the timing for the ELA standards, and those things. And so there's still work to be done from the state level on validating the information on each one of those. So I wanted to be able to talk through those elements. Now, here's what we've talked about for, I would even say maybe 2 years. As we actually passed, just from a timeline perspective, we passed the new English language arts standards in 2015. The timeline for that means that schools basically found that out and started to adjust their instruction, hopefully by the next year at least, right? I mean, hopefully that was starting to happen there, but in a pretty short window of time, and their students are being assessed on those new standards right away. And so we talked about it a lot. We expected, hey, look, you'll see a difference in expectations, but we also see a difference in where students meet from proficiency to otherwise. And we knew that, and when the Teaching and Learning Committee had looked at that issue, I think it was back in August relative to that work. Different also is because of ACT, we had to set a new expectation of what those standards were from the state board. And so beginning to explain how that works. When you look at the data statewide in a preliminary sense, you get an idea of, hey, look, we've raised the bar, and the expectation of raising the bar means that fewer meet that bar right away. It takes time, actually, in the education process to adjust instruction and see those results actually start to grow. I think this is what's critical for us. We're laying out a new baseline for the expectations of schools all across the state every time we redo standards. Now, we've already redone math standards. That's not impacting us this year, but it will impact us next year. And we've just gone through science standards, and that will change the expectations as we go forward. So it's really a multi-year process to be able to set all those expectations. And schools are in a moment in time where they're having to explain that to their students. And I wanted to let you know that's why I wanted to be able to explain this and work with the press on these issues and have conversations there. And be able to answer those particular questions. Later, we'll have our actual release of statewide data. We'll have our Nebraska education profile with all of the other information that goes into that, so it can be disaggregated by subgroups, which is also an important part of our processes, that we look at all of those things that come together ultimately into AQuest. But I wanted to share that with you. There's some timing issues. Obviously, we have a lot of work yet to do on the implementation fully of ESSA as that becomes part of our accountability efforts. We talked in the strategic planning committee just briefly yesterday about timelines of how we do business rules ultimately underneath AQuest, and how we make changes that are necessary within our process to make that possible. So I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. I'm probably missing something I meant to share, so if there's some question you have, I will try to answer it. So.
Does anyone have any questions of the commissioner?
You're going to be easier than the press, probably.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move to item 10, board reports, dates, and discussion items. We discussed yesterday, and it is in your notes on your computers, of meeting participation. Is there a motion to approve?
Make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, your votes, please.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
Lisa Fricky,
Yes.
Patsy Ko-Johns,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Our next one is item 11. There are some things listed for your information that we don't normally go into a discussion. And is there anything else for the good of the order? Then I will announce that the work session will be held on Wednesday, November 8th at 2 p.m. and a board meeting held on Thursday, November 9th at 9 a.m. in this room. This is a week later than we normally meet, and we are meeting on Wednesday and Thursday because of Veterans Day being on Friday. We will also be attending the Awards of Excellence Luncheon celebrating the 2018 Teacher of the Year, and that will be on Wednesday, November 8th at 11:30. So thank you for attending. Have a good weekend.